everybody. Welcome to the Minimalists Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus. And together we are the Minimalists.
And we are here. It's an exciting day. We're here with
really
our
is.
brand new co-host. His name is TK Coleman. Ladies and gentlemen, TK Coleman.
Yeah!
Yo! I was literally born yesterday. Brand new.
So, Ryan, we were talking earlier on the private podcast, and we realized this is like Steph and Clay finally being joined by Matt McClung.
Oh, man. I was hoping you would say Matt McClung, not KD, because Matt McClung is the next Scott Skiles, dude. No one's going to get that reference.
No.
Hey, but that's a bad dude, man. That dude can play ball.
So we do have TK is our new KD, though. Let's be honest here. We've won some championships before him, but now he's on the team. We're taking the podcast to a whole new level, a whole new format.
Preach.
And I cannot wait, TK. Why are we doing this?
Because you need me to handle LeBron.
That's right.
Because when we get in the clutch and you're like, hey, somebody needs to go get a bucket. You know, you can give me the ball and I'll take it to the hole. No, I need to talk in language that people will actually understand. We're doing this, man, because it's fun. Sometimes we fail to listen to our hearts and do what we are called to do because we feel like we need to have this really profound, philosophical, sophisticated, justificatory answer for everything we do. The reality is, in the absence of a logically and morally compelling reason to do otherwise, you should do what you love. You should do what's fun, what feels right for you. And this feels right. So I can pretend like it's about, you know, the analysis of this pro and the analysis of that con, but that would just be me conning you with a story that I think you would respect me for having. I'm doing this because it feels like a hell yes.
Amen.
It's a hell yes for all of us, for sure.
Did you think when you were on our podcast for the very first time, were you like, one day I'm going to be the third host on this show?
No, I had no concept of that whatsoever. But
I did.
can't
For
tell
the first time, I'm like, we need to get TK on here more.
Was it like love at first sight?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're like, he's the one for me?
Yeah, right.
Oh, dude, I didn't know that, man. It feels so good. My first time, I felt like, my first time on this show, I felt like, you gotta be clear these days, man, because people will eat you alive in the YouTube comments.
Right, yeah.
You were thinking about Josh your first time?
Yeah.
My first time on this show, I thought, man, this feels so great. You know what I mean? Like this, of all the interviews and conversations I've done, I feel like the chemistry and the camaraderie is better here than it's ever been. And just the balance between levity and gravity, the willingness to get serious, but the unapologetic willingness to laugh at the same time. So good, man.
Yeah.
So good.
Heck
So
yeah.
I'm ready, man. I'm excited.
Coming up today on this free public minimal episode, we're talking to a listener about having a funeral for things. We'll also have an outstanding lightning round question for you. You can check out the full 3-hour Maximal episode this week where we answer 4 times the questions and we dive deep into 7 new simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at theminimalists.com/private, or just click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free. Our first question today is from Steven in Fort Worth, Texas.
A good work buddy of mine recently passed away without any warning. He seemed healthy one day. The next day he was on the ground at work having a seizure. And a week later he was gone. Shortly after he died, they had a funeral and invited all of us from work. I was still in shock and I just couldn't pull myself to go. I didn't want to see him dead like that. I guess I wasn't ready for the closure they say a funeral brings. Now I'm feeling a bunch of guilt for not going to his final send-off and giving my condolences to his family, letting them know we all love the dude so much. I know you guys always say don't do things because society tells us to, but is going to a friend or family member's funeral the ultimate social pressure? Something we're expected to do? And if we don't, we're being very disrespectful to that person or their family?
Now, TK, I wanted to start with this question because you and I had a phone call recently and we were talking about different kinds of funerals. And what I realized from that conversation is that a funeral is sort of a celebration of letting go. And here's what I mean by that. I moved out of the apartment/condo that I'd been renting for the last 5 years that was in West Hollywood. and my family moved up to Ventura County. And in doing that, all of these emotions began to stir up within me because I realized I was moving on to something. And in order to move on, I had to let go of what had served me for a period of time. Now, we're not talking about a person here. We're talking about a thing or a place, right? In this case, it was both. And all of the sentimentality that gets tied up into a place or into a thing. And sometimes it makes sense to have a funeral. So I literally, when I moved out, the day I moved out, I had a funeral for that chapter of my life. I was celebrating it in order for me to let go. I was appreciating it for what it was. And I find that we can do that for things as well. As we start to let go of material possessions, we can say, hey, thank you. This is something Marie Kondo does even. Thanks the thing for serving a purpose, but it's no longer serving a purpose. So I am going to let it go. I'm going to sell it, donate it, recycle it, trash it if I have to, in order to let go. But just because you let go of the thing doesn't mean you've let go of the thing. Because what happens sometimes is I let go of the physical thing, but then I cling to it in my mind. And that's quite often what we do with relationships. If someone dies, I remember when my mother died, obviously that was a traumatic experience for me. And because she was gone, I had to physically let go. But mentally, emotionally, it took a while for me to let go. And realizing this many years later is that the celebration or the funeral isn't for the person who died. The funeral is for the people who need to let go of that person. And when I talked to you on the phone recently, you were at a funeral, and we started talking about having funerals for people, for things, for places, so that we can move on.
That's right. So the man who passed away in my life was my father's right-hand man. And although my childhood was filled with many great men, this particular guy, his name was Lorenzo, was the guy that was always there whenever my father couldn't be. And because he was always there, it was important to me in closing out that chapter of my life to be there for him at that moment. And I said at his funeral, the reason I came, as inconvenient and costly as it was, is because I knew for sure if it was my funeral, he would have been there. And so by being there for him in that moment, it gave me the opportunity to sort of close it out and say, here's what he represented to me, and here's how I can let his legacy live through me. But you're absolutely right. Death is a kind of letting go, and it's easier to let go when you take the time to consider who this person was or what this thing was, and you evaluate what it meant to your life and how it shaped your story. That makes it easier to let go. And I think it's interesting that this question is coming from someone who says, I'm having trouble letting go, and I'm also the guy that didn't go. There's kind of a correlation there, right? That's why we go, not because we're morally obligated to do so, but because we go for us. Now, to address this question directly, though, very quickly, there's this parable that Jesus tells where a guy has two sons, and the father, he asks both sons to do work for him. One son says, no, I'm not going to do it. The other son says, yes, I'll do it. The son who said yes forgets and never gets around to it. The son who says no has a change of heart later on, and he goes and gets the work done. And the question that Jesus asks is, who was the good son? Was it the one who said the right things? Or was it the one who did the right thing? And the answer was, it was the one who did the right thing, even though what he said didn't quite match that. And I think it's interesting because we can live our entire lives hating people, ignoring them, not being a good friend to them, but then we show up to their funeral and we say all the right things. And then we can spend our entire lives loving people, enjoying their company, and then we miss the funeral because of some kind of unforeseen circumstance, and we feel terrible as if we failed them. And what I would say to you, Stephen, is I would care more about how I treated that friend when he was alive than I would about my inability or my failure to go to the funeral. Because the best way to honor someone's legacy is not to show up at a funeral service and say things that aren't a match to what you actually did, but it's to treat them with respect and kindness and love when they're here, and then to allow that same respect, kindness, and love to live through you. You represent the highest values that they exhibited to you, and then you embody that in your interactions with others. I would let go of the guilt, because either your friend is unconscious of you right now, or he's conscious of you. If he's unconscious of you, then he's not holding it against you. And if he's conscious of you, he's probably got higher dimensional things to be worried about than that. And he's probably wishing that you would forgive yourself and let that go. Honor him not by going to the event. That's already passed. You can't control that. Honor him by taking a moment and saying, what did he mean to me? What were those qualities I loved about him? And how can I give him a head nod and pay homage to him by treating other people in that way?
Yeah. It's Milburn. That was such a fascinating perspective on funerals. It's not for the person who died. It is for the people who show up there. So, Stephen, it sounds to me he's having trouble letting go of this guilt because he wasn't, like he said, he wasn't ready to let go. He didn't get an opportunity to tell this man's family what an important person he was. So, I mean, Stephen, if that's it, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with like making a phone call, maybe sending a letter, or maybe sending an email, and just tell them exactly what you just told us. Hey, I really wish I could have made it to the funeral. I wasn't ready to let go, but I'm ready to let go now. But I just want to let you all know how important this man was at our work. This made me think of Stan when we got like all that sudden news from. We had a friend who passed away January 2014. We were just starting our 100 city tour, and it was out of the blue. And it's interesting because like he told me that he had a history of heart problems and that he needed to look out for his health, but he looked like a pretty healthy guy. But he passed away from a heart attack, and like Josh and I got that news. I don't even think we had our first stop yet. We were in Tampa, or St. Pete, staying in a hotel. We haven't even had our first stop yet. And my first inclination was, let's go to the funeral. Let's go to the funeral. And we were looking at it, and it wasn't going to work. Like it just wasn't going to work. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I certainly had a longing to be there and like, again, to support his family and to let his family know. But it was funny. I was talking to a friend who did go to the funeral, and he went up to Stan's father, said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that Josh Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, they really send their condolences and they're sorry they couldn't be here." And Stan's dad was like, Nicodemus. because
that says it all.
Yeah. But so I mean, all that to say is that, Stan's dad knew, I never met Stan's dad, but Stan's dad knew me through Stan because he knew that, we were close friends. So it's okay he didn't go to the funeral. Let that go. This guilt, I think, is something maybe you want to look at in the future, Stephen. Like, guilt is a symptom of something that you've done wrong. I wouldn't feel shame around it. But this guilt you can use as leverage to make a different decision if you should have, a decision similar to this in the future.
And I would say also that is true, and even doubly true for deaths that aren't people deaths, that aren't human death, but the death of a thing. If something stops adding value to my life, it has died in an important way. Although we continue to hold on to those carcasses. That's why I call the Container Store, I don't call them storage containers, I call them clutter coffins, because that's quite often what we do. We take our dead things, the things that are no longer serving us, and we put them in these coffins, and then we create these mausoleums, basements, attics, etc., where we store these dead things. Well, why? Because we never stop to have that funeral for them. And the way that you and I had a funeral for Stan wasn't to go to his actual funeral, but there's an essay in our book, Essential, which, by the way, Stephen, I'd love to send you a copy of that book. The last essay in that book is called Live Like Stan. And what we talk about in there is he died when he was 36, but he lived more than most 86-year-olds. Yeah. And I think that's something that's worth noting. The health span of a person is not the same thing as the lifespan of a person. And so, yes, maybe he didn't have the longest life, but he had a life in which he actually lived. And so, Stephen, what is going to help you live here? Well, it's clear that letting go is going to help you live. So if you enjoy our podcast, we'd love to send you an audiobook version of Essential. I think it's our longest audiobook. It's like 6 or 7 hours. Or if you want the book or the ebook version, we'll be happy to send those to you as well, Stephen. Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round where we answer your text messages. You can text your questions, your comments, and anything else you want to send us. You can text it to 937-202-4654.
Yes, indeed. Now, during the lightning round, this is where we do our best to answer questions with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media. By the way, thanks to our good friend Social Jess, you can find all of our minimal maxims over at minimalmaxims.com. Looks like Mike has a question for us.
I'm bothered by my mother moving on to be with another man less than a year after my father's death. I'm trying to be supportive, but I'm struggling to accept this guy parking in my dad's spot on the driveway. Any advice?
So this is fascinating, Ryan.
Yeah, it is.
Because I was talking about this a few episodes ago. I think it was episode 348. So here's my pithy answer for you. Maybe we can unpack it together. Nobody has the power to bother you unless you hand them that power. And by the way, I do this all the time. So this is not a judgment. It is merely an observation. Anytime that I am bothered, it's because I've given you that power to bother me. Here's the irony of this, and I haven't talked to you about it yet, although there's an email sitting in your inbox right now. We had Dr. Susan David on the podcast, and it was a wonderful episode, especially that maximal episode that we did with her. And my goodness, it was a beautiful conversation I felt like we had, right? And one of the best moments was this moment where I started talking about how no one has the power to upset you unless you hand them that power. And then I went on to talk about my own expectations creating a prison around me. And she had a great line where she talked about expectations. And then we shared that clip on TikTok and Instagram, just a short little 1-minute clip of us having that dialogue. And Susan's people reached out to us afterwards and they were like, hey, can you please take that clip down?
Oh, wow.
Really? And she's like, we don't think this represents Susan's point of view. I said, well, yeah, it probably doesn't. I didn't post it to represent her point of view. When TK says something on the podcast, it doesn't represent my point of view.
Right.
When Ryan says something on the podcast, it doesn't represent my point of view. Now, I'm not going to be silenced. Here's the irony of this. When I got that email, what? I was upset.
Yeah, right.
And so I was upset.
How ironic, yes.
Right. Because I gave that power to them to upset me. And it's really hard to understand that anytime that I get angry, anytime I get frustrated, anytime I get sad because of what someone else has done to me, all I've done is hand them that power to manipulate my emotions. And the same is also true with happiness. Ryan, you don't have the ability to make me upset. You also don't have the ability to make me happy. Only I have the ability to make me happy. Here's the quandary, though. That happiness is already there. That is my default state. Happiness. And yet, I often cover it up. Why? Because I have set an expectation or I've handed the power of my emotions over to TK or Mallory or Jordan or whomever. I've set expectations that make me miserable. It's not you who's making me miserable. It's the Schopenhauer quote. A man does not enjoy Paris. He enjoys himself in Paris. I always say that about my wife. I don't enjoy Bex. I enjoy myself in Bex.
Ayo, sex joke.
I'm going to need a confession booth right in the corner of the studio for each episode.
You know, the happiness is the default state. I don't know if we can go off on too much of a tangent here. But it's funny because I think about a child being born and the default state is like discomfort, crying, needing, longing, wanting, constantly, literally screaming for attention. And it's not until, they start to like try and figure things out that they start to really be happy and they start to just have that joy that you see little kids have.
I didn't say that it was the only state.
No. Yeah. Right.
In fact, we talked about this. My favorite episode, we've done 2 amazing episodes recently. One was with TK called Political Clutter. It's a private podcast episode. And another private podcast episode we did, it might be my favorite of all time. It was called How to Be Satisfied. And it was episode 349. And we dissected this long article about How to Want Less by Arthur C. Brooks. And in that conversation, you and I determined that happiness or satisfaction is the default state, and dissatisfaction is also the default state.
Oh, yeah, we did talk about that. Yeah. The only reason I bring this up is because I think there is something to recognize or to form like a détente with or a relationship with discomfort. When we're uncomfortable, that's where we're not happy, right? And when that discomfort arises within us, then when we project that out, like that's when we're not happy. But understanding that, like getting comfortable with that discomfort, like holding space for that discomfort, allowing to be a little bit uncomfortable, will actually lead you to this default state of happiness. Yeah. All right, I got a pithy answer for this one. Mike, when in doubt, choose compassion. When Mike asked his question, it reminded me of when my parents split up and my mom went and got a boyfriend and my dad went and got a girlfriend. And I was furious. I was so jealous. I was like, no, these are my parents. I don't have room for two more parents. And I acted like a real jerk. There was one girlfriend my dad had that I know for a fact, like she broke up with him because like I was so intolerable. Like I was just, I'm so sorry. Hope, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry for being such a jerky little kid. But makes me think, though, if I could go back, I wish I could hold compassion for my mom. I wish I could hold compassion for my dad, because that would have helped me to at least take the edge off of that jealousy or that discomfort that I feel. Another pithy answer is compassion is an antidote to suffering. And it sounds like there's some suffering going on here. And Mike, if there's any way you can find any compassion for your mom, because she's going through a lot too, that might help, at least help you see it through her eyes rather than feeding into this emotion of anger or jealousy or whatever emotion you would call it.
Yeah, Ryan, you're making me think of something with Ella. Ella's 9 now, my daughter, and Bex and I went on a trip to Seattle recently, had an awesome time, and we were talking to her on the phone after the fact. She was with her biological dad, and Bex was like, yeah, we had such a great time, and you could see the look on Ella's face. She said, You had fun without me?
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
And so she presupposes that she needs to be there in order for Bex to enjoy herself, for me to enjoy myself. Otherwise, we can't have joy. And all Bex did was turn around. She said, hey, you've been gone for a few days. You've been doing the summer camp thing. Have you had any fun without us? And Ella goes, oh, yeah. Now, TK, you had a really interesting pithy answer that I made even pithier here. So if you want to read that, and then maybe we can expand on it a little bit.
Yes, sir. Your heart can't afford the damage caused by judging and resisting. Your heart can't afford the damage caused by judging and resisting. One of the phrases that jumped out at me about this question is, you said less than a year. My mother moving on to be with another man less than a year after my father's death. And so there's a kind of evaluation that's going on there that maybe my mother should have taken more time before jumping into a new relationship. And there's an underlying assumption beneath that judgment, something like to move on quickly is to move on flippantly. And C.S. Lewis calls this chronological snobbery, which is the idea of judging the goodness or badness of something based on how old it is, how new it is, how fast it is, how slow it is, right? Because there are fast things, there are things that move fast that are terrible, things that move slow that are good. There are things that are very old and terrible, things that are very new and good, and vice versa. One way we can kind of see how this is a manifestation of that is look at the opposite, criticizing someone who takes a long time to get over the death of a loved one, right? Someone's spouse or a significant other passes away. It's 2 years later and they're still sad. Haven't you moved on yet?
Oh, yeah.
Haven't you moved on yet? Come on. It's already been 2 years. And maybe that's because we imagine ourselves in that situation and we imagine that we would have moved on by then. And so we project our own pacing onto them and say, you should be over it by now. Well, judging someone for moving on too quickly is similar to judging them for moving on too slowly. One makes the assumption that to move on quickly is to move on poorly, and the other is to move on slowly. To move on quickly is to move on flippantly. And so what I would say is allow your mother the space to move on in the way that is best for her, and to know that this too is a part of her healing process. There is no disrespect to your father in how much time it takes her to move on to a new relationship. The other thing I would say is that her moving on too quickly might be less of an indicator of anything going on with her and more of an indicator on your own readiness to embrace this. And that's okay. Maybe it's too quickly for your comfort level. Maybe it's really hard for you to celebrate this relationship when you're still letting go. And what I would encourage you to do, especially if you have, the kind of relationship with your mom where you can talk to her transparently, I would say something to her like, Mom, you know I love you and I have your back and I respect you and I want you to be happy. And so I support what you're doing, but I just want you to know it's hard for me. And I'm not ready yet. I can't leap through the roof in excitement over it. And I just want you to know, if it ever seems as if I don't have your back, please understand I just need more time. And so maybe I can't be at all the things. Maybe I'm not ready to go to the movies with you guys just yet, but just give me time and please respect my pace as I respect yours. Do whatever you got to do, Mom, to live your best life, and just give me a little time to process. And I think she'd understand that.
I love that, man. Like just having an open conversation with your mom about it. Like that's a great idea. I mean, again, we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, like when you can have difficult conversations with someone in a mature way. Yeah. That's huge. So yeah, I love that. What you're talking about too, TK, is clinging to these judgments, clinging to his dad's parking spot. And I wanted to say something about that to Autumn as well. Like when we cling, we are preventing ourselves from moving forward. When we cling, we're getting dragged by something. And I think what that means for
Mike.
Yeah, for Mike here is like, if you want to move forward, when you get these emotions that you're clinging to, like really observe that and really ask yourself, is this the emotion that you want to foster? Is this the emotion that you want to like just stir up inside of you? Or can you look at that and be like, okay, thank you for this memory of my father. This feeling is a symptom of how much I miss my father. I do miss my father. And then try to find a way to move forward. Because clinging, again, it's going to drag you.
I can tell you that if I died tomorrow, I would hope that my wife was able to move on within a time frame that was suitable for her.
I'll never get another business partner.
All right, before we get on to our other segments here, Malabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hello, this is Megan. I am 27 from Tempe, Arizona, and I just had a comment. So I just got out of a divorce and had to move into a 1-bedroom apartment. I previously lived in a 3-bedroom house with lots and lots of stuff. And when I moved, I decided I would only take the essentials with me. And so now I'm in a very empty apartment. I don't even have a couch. I've been sitting on the living room floor. But my comment was, I have made a list of the things that I want to buy for the apartment, and I am waiting 2 weeks for any item that has been added to the list. And the list everything has a date on it from when it's added, so that I know that I'm waiting enough time to see if it's something that I actually need or if it's something that I can go without.
All right, y'all, before we get to our added value segment this week. Real quick for right here, right now. Here's one thing that's going on in the life of the Minimalists. We're doing a local event in Los Angeles. It's already sold out, so you can't come. I'm sorry.
But what you can do...
I'm going to tell you what you're going to miss.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about the fear of missing out. Well, I hope you're afraid.
We're doing this to help people get used to the fear of missing out.
That's right. So we're doing these small events in Los Angeles, only 200 people. We announced it on the podcast and it filled up within an hour. I'd say sold out, but we had free tickets and we had pay for tickets. It was pay whatever you want. And so it's accessible to anyone, right? It's called Sunday Symposium. People from all different beliefs. We're doing it Sundays at noon. The first one is August 28th. And then we're going to do one a month after that for the rest of the year. We're just trying this out. We're going to learn a whole lot from these experiences. But you can get on the waiting list right now, sundaysymposium.com. If you're on that waiting list, two things will happen. One is if a ticket frees up, someone can't make it, they'll give up their ticket. You can then attend this first event, or you'll be the first to hear about future events. So you can get free tickets, or you can pay for tickets if you'd like to help us pay for the venue. Why are we doing this, TK?
We're doing this because we love to play, we love to discover, we love to be curious, and we love to disrupt things for the sake of exploring something new. And I think in this whole podcasting space, it's really easy to just kind of get comfortable in your studios, whether you're at home or in an office space, and just kind of talk at people and then post something up online. But there's something to be said about getting out there and engaging real human beings live, interacting with people, creating relationships and so on. And I just think there's a powerful dynamic that comes from that. And we got a chance to experience that when we were on tour together. Mm-hmm. There's just an energy in the room when we're there together with people, laughing together, joking together, philosophizing together, questioning and wrestling with questions together. There's no substitute for that. And given what this world experienced in 2020, I think we all have a renewed sense of appreciation for the ability to be able to go out and connect.
Yeah. Connection and community. Like that's what I'm really looking forward to with this.
There's a depth here that you don't experience. The podcast reaches hundreds of thousands, or some podcasts even millions of people, right? But here we're talking about 200 people. It's not about width. Ryan and I have talked at live events in front of 15,000 people. We've had our own live events with several thousand people who attend. This isn't about that. It's not about going wide and reaching the broadest possible audience. It's about what can we discover if we go deep. We're going to have a special guest at the first one. Amanda Montell will be there. She'll be there just to make sure we're not starting a cult. She wrote the book Cultish. And we have a special musical guest there as well. We're going to play around with these. We're going to learn a lot, and you're welcome to learn with us together. We'll do audience Q&A. We'll have a discussion. We'll have special guests. We'll have live music and so much more. SundaySymposium.com. You can find all the details over there. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. For added value this week, here's a beautiful song from a beautiful album by Aaron Wheats. So Aaron is a friend with one of our friends, Austin St. John. He does the color correction on the podcast, total visual genius. And I'm grateful that we've been able to work with him on the color and some of the lighting for the podcast. And he's just a great guy. He works over at Mosaic, and someone he works with and is friends with, Aaron Wheats, has a beautiful album. Nick Drake put out an album 50 years ago called Pink Moon. And he's sort of the progenitor to today's modern singer-songwriter music. And this album is a reinterpretation of that. It's all made with a modular synth. And I thought it was beautiful to play this on our first episode with TK Coleman, because what has worked really well for 50 years, or for a long time, for Nick Drake, now he's reinterpreted that. And that's what we're doing with this podcast. It's worked really well for a long time with me and Ryan and guests, but bringing TK on so we can have these discussions, so we can disagree in a way that is helpful, that is meaningful, that is useful to the audience is really important. So I hope you enjoy this track from Aaron Wheats. This is the title track to Pink Moon. By the way, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can just click somewhere up here. There will be the YouTube version of the song. By the way, we got 2 more hours of less on, actually it's 3 more hours on the Minimalist Private Podcast this week. We went a while. It is the best $5 you'll ever spend, or $10 if you want the video version of the podcast. But $5 for the audio version of the podcast. You get access to all of our archives as well. Just visit theminimalists.com/private or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episode plays in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain immediate access to recordings of live events, weekly home tours. We're doing this new segment where we go into our homes weekly, and you'll get to check that out. And our private community of thousands of open-minded minimizers like you. In fact, here's a thoughtful testimonial from one of our lovely private podcast subscribers. Malabama, will you read DL's comment?
I have followed you guys since your couch surfing days, and you have always added value to my life. But your recent Maximal episode about political clutter, that was the best conversations ever. Your private podcast has expanded my world in all the ways I've been craving but wasn't finding. It has answered questions I didn't even know how to ask. And it's the first podcast I want to re-listen to. It is so packed with wisdom, discomfort, and mind-expanding ideas. Thank you for all the years, and especially for this conversation.
That was one of my favorite conversations. TK was actually part of that as well.
Yeah.
The political clutter episode.
Was
and
great.
then Ryan and I did another one recently called How to Be Satisfied. I think those 2, which were recorded relatively recently, are 2 of my favorite episodes we've ever done. And so I think just signing up for a month, check it out. For 1 month, $5, you can just check those 2 conversations out. Well worth your time. But also the conversation we just had for episode 351, 3+ hours of living with less. You can follow The Minimalist on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Minimalist. If you have a question, comment, or a tip for our podcast, give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. If you want our podcast show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com. On behalf of Ryan Nicodemus, TK Coleman, Malabama, Podcast Sean, Jordan O'More, Professor Sean, Social Jess, Danny Unknown, Post-Production Peter, Emma the Immigrant, and the rest of our team, my name is Joshua Fields Milburn. If you leave here today with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.